Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of TideIllustrated.com. Jack Knowlton, Tony Sakalis, still shocked by what we've witnessed. I was certainly not expecting back-to-back weeks of a crazy result for Alabama. And that's what we got in the opposite direction. Just 1 week after knocking off Georgia and going up to number one in the AP poll, Alabama goes to Vandy, a team it had a very long win streak against, and loses 40-35 to Diego Pavia, an unranked Commodore side that lost to Georgia State earlier this season. Fans stormed the field. Goalposts were torn down. Alabama has since plummeted to number 7 in the AP poll here on this Sunday when we're recording this show for you guys. I'm stunned. Tony, I'm sure you're stunned, and everyone else in the press box with us was stunned.
I wouldn't have thought in a million years that Alabama would have lost to Vanderbilt. And I knew this Vanderbilt team was better than a normal Vanderbilt team, but it's still, I just wouldn't have thought it. But there were things that foreshadowed it. I mean, you had this was a lot of this was it's different, but a lot of this was the South Florida game where except they were punished a little bit more, where they they weren't great. They couldn't get off the field. They couldn't force turnovers, and then actually I was more thinking about the turnovers, but you lose the turnover battle a lot of times. You're gonna lose the game. And so you lost it 2-0. The defense was awful, Jack. I mean, didn't force a turnover, didn't record a sack. You were on the field for 42 minutes. You were 12 of 18, right, on third down. I mean, what did it do well? The secondary is terrible. The tackling was garbage. I mean, it was really bad. I mean, and it wasn't like Vanderbilt was just beating them on big plays. They had a few of those what do you call them? Shovel passes that, I thought that was creative, but really it was just simple 4 or 5 yards on first and second down, set up manageable third downs, pick them up. On the times that they did have a third and long, Alabama's secondary would break down. And, it is absolutely crazy that Alabama's defense just can't get off the field recently. They forced, 3 punts over the last 6 quarters. I mean, against Georgia, it was fourth downs that they couldn't stop, and against Vanderbilt, it was third downs. Although there was a touchdown on fourth down as well. So I mean, this team cannot get off the field. It doesn't have that killer gene, and it's really concerning. A lot of the problems I think that you looked at heading into the season just really haven't been solved the way that we thought. I think that the secondary is not a good secondary right now. It's not good. I think the front seven is decent, but if you don't get the pass rush, or if you're against a team like this where they can continuously get yardage and your secondary is not going to bail you out, or even capitalize on third and long, you're kind of cooked. I mean, there's really not a lot you can do when the secondary is that consistently bad. I haven't seen an Alabama defense that's performed worse than these last 6 quarters. I can't tell you when. It's bad. Alabama is consistently bad. There's been times I think where fans have complained about Pete Golding defense. They gave up a big points to good offenses. This team, I think it's a below average SEC defense right now, the way it's playing. But I think it has the potential to be better. But at the moment, I think this defense is just poor, and you can't expect it to stop anyone.
Yeah, I want to get into the nitty gritty of what went wrong with this defense specifically, but I want to go back first, just generally, to a point you made at the top, and you wrote about this in your column as well, which everyone should go read. I mean, Alabama did the rat traps thing all around the team's facility. They talked all week. I think you wrote it in your column, to quote you, practically begged reporters to ask them about Vanderbilt instead of Georgia. Talked about the rat poison. You made a rat poison drink with our good friends over at Session to kind of symbolize this game. And yet, DeBoer said afterward they had practiced what Vanderbilt was going to bring them on defense all week. And yet it seems like they drank the poison and did not look at all like they were focused on the team in front of them. Q Robinson even said as much, that they kind of bit the cheese, was the word he used, and kind of took took some of the, it's Vandy is Vandy, and this game is what it is. And it absolutely bit them. And it feels incredibly concerning given the messaging we were given in the build up to this game versus what we then saw on the field.
Yeah, it is concerning. Because it seemed like they had all the positive signs. I think at a certain point, though, I mean, you can talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk, and just because you're well prepared, or just because you're taking Vanderbilt seriously from a physical standpoint, from a we're going to be focused during practice. I don't know. There's part of it that's just a mental aspect that really I'm not sure. I mean, I think you can blame the coaching staff for the team being a little bit I don't know, maybe it's starting slow. Maybe that had to do with being overconfident. But I mean, like, how much I wasn't at practice, so I don't get to see it, but how much more can you really expect from the coaching staff? I mean, the message was consistent all week. They were hammering it home. They put the rat traps. I think the rat traps almost can be, some of that stuff can be almost like so theatrical that you lose the seriousness maybe of respecting the opponent, and maybe even the fact that, I mean, if you really want to get nitpicky with, coaching and preparation, maybe don't call it a trap game. You know what I'm saying? Like, calling it a trap game, in a sense, belittles the opponent.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know what I'm saying? Maybe just, don't even call it a trap game. Just say, like, hey, Vanderbilt's good. Vanderbilt should be 4-0. Like, maybe that should be the message. But I don't think you can fault the coaching staff for the preparation. I mean, from what we saw, the message was pretty on point. A lot of it's just up to the players. I mean, you just got to come out there and you've got to have that killer instinct, and you've got to be able to, even if things don't go right away, good teams have the ability to bounce back. And, like, Alabama just wasn't making those stops early in the game on defense, and then, you get into a little bit of, you don't make a stop on the first drive. Fine. A lot of the first drives are scripted. A lot of times you don't come out. You're on the road. You maybe not take the opponent totally serious. Give up a touchdown. Fine. That happens even to the best of disciplined teams. That happens. Then your offense throws a pick six. You're in a little bit of a hole. Still, Alabama knows that they're in control of that game. They're even down 13. It's fine. You get a few stops. The offense is going to keep on rolling. And to the offense's credit, when it was on the field, it was moving the ball pretty consistently. I mean, there was a couple times that, things didn't work out, but I thought that you really can't take too much off of what the offense did. So, I mean, like, the defense just needs to make a stop early in the game. You need to respond. Vanderbilt's a good team, and that option offense is tough to stop, and it's hard to prepare for. You're still Alabama. I mean, you're the level of talent on Alabama's side is better than the level of talent on Vanderbilt's side. And I'm not saying that Vanderbilt's not a competitive team. And look, Vanderbilt's going to win some games this year. They're going to upset some people. Auburn's probably laughing at Alabama right now, but if I'm Auburn, I'm scared as hell, because this is one of the games I thought maybe, I could take. And now if you look at this team and you're like, damn, this Vanderbilt team should be 2-0 in SEC play. It's a good team. It's not a great Vanderbilt team. Let's not get it confused. I don't think it necessarily even should be ranked. Like, I know I got some points, but it's a good Vanderbilt team. But let's not get it confused. It's not. It shouldn't have been able to compete with Alabama or just bully Alabama the way that it did. Like I said, they weren't beating Alabama on total defensive breakdowns per se. Most of it was just getting 3 or 4 or 5 yards on first down and setting things up, in a manageable fashion. That's just something that, Alabama should have known. There were times when Vanderbilt was obviously going to run the ball and Alabama still couldn't stop them. And that just seems like so foreign to me in terms of, you think of an Alabama defense, especially against a team it should overpower. If you know something's coming and you still can't stop it, that's pretty concerning. And just the lack of real pressure they put on Diego Pavia. I know that Vanderbilt's, offense is not set up really for him he can avoid pressure with the way things are set up. But yeah, it's tough, and they didn't respond the way that you'd want. And then it really kind of affected everything else. The defense doesn't get things going, and it really forces the way the offense has to operate. And especially with a team like Vanderbilt, who can just tick time off the clock. yeah, it just kind of snowballs from there.
Definitely does. And I like your point about not just winning the game, but flat out dominating. And it was in a fashion where Vanderbilt seemed to kind of work smarter rather than harder, like you said, with these, short yardage plays. Well, I mean, all the credit I think has to go to Clark Lee and what he's done to set that team up. I mean, they are moving, like you said. It's not going to be maybe even a ranked team this year, but that team can beat some people, and they do it smartly. So credit to them. And
there's been some times where Alabama's like fallen victim to an inspired Auburn side where a lot of it, was a little bit of hocus pocus, a little bit of luck. I think Vanderbilt just straight up. The most surprising thing of this game, Jack, was I think Vanderbilt just lined up and beat Alabama. Like without, I mean, what's really one play in that game where you were like, oh, that was a little bit like hocus pocus? No, they didn't have like a double pass or a bobbled. I mean, I think you can say Alabama got a little bit unlucky with that pick six, the way it like popped up in the air. But other than that, I don't even really think you can say like Vanderbilt got lucky on anything. If anything, Vanderbilt was unlucky on like the fumble on Emmanuel Henderson with his elbow hitting the ground. Like it could have been worse. I just thought that Vanderbilt lined up and beat Alabama, and that's just concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. And that led to more frustrations, kind of confounding. And we're going to dive, like I said, into the defense in a second, but I think we should address earlier-ish in this show what happened at the end of the game with one of Alabama's defensive players before Vanderbilt stormed the field a couple plays before, which I also want to shout them out because it was a majority Alabama crowd, as was expected. And those Vanderbilt students, absolutely poured it onto the field after a bit. I didn't think they were going to be able to make it on. They ripped the goalpost down, walked them nearly 3 miles to the Cumberland River on Broadway, which, I imagine those students just had a blast. So, hopefully they're nursing the hangover here on Sunday. But I imagine that was fun. But yeah, going back to the very end of the game, Tony, and you wrote about this, the kind of coup de grace, if you will, of Alabama's defensive woes coming at the end of the game where one of its captains, one of its leaders, a fifth-year guy in Malachi Moore, just throws an outright tantrum on the field in the final plays. That's the only thing you can call it. He kicked the football. He refused to be subbed out for Bray Hubbard. You wrote about it, talked with DeBoer and some players. What did they say about it? And then adding to that, is this some concerning behavior from Malachi Moore, or is this more just an overreaction to a loss that no one was expecting, whether you were a fan or even a player on this team?
I'm surprised at the time of, we're talking right now, Sunday evening. I'm surprised that Malachi Moore hasn't made some kind of public apology as a team captain. I mean, this was embarrassing. He embarrassed himself. I mean, like, whichever way you want to take it, whether it's, being a team captain and letting the team down, letting his coaching staff down, disregarding Kane Wommack. This looked like I was watching. Did you watch Last Chance U? The junior. He looked like like one of those, junior college players that can't make it on a team because he doesn't have any discipline. And this is somebody that's been a captain. And I'm kind of coming down hard on Malachi Moore. He's a good kid. He's a kid that's what just makes it more crazy that like this is not the kind of kid that you would expect to do this. But like I don't think you can just say, oh, Malachi Moore is a good kid and like the team should just, he's just passionate. This is not a just passionate moment. Just passionate would have been kicking the football. Just passionate would have been maybe even pushing the dirty hit on Diego Pavia when he was already on the ground. Like those kind of things happen, right? Throwing an absolute hissy fit for, basically 2 plays, ignoring your coach when he comes onto the field, just throwing your mouth, just acting like an absolute clown on the field. That's more than just passion. That's bad leadership. Like to me, if he didn't already have a C on his chest, like, and I know the team votes on this, so it's it's a kind of a moot point, but you don't get to be captain after a performance like that. Like this is like something that would negate a captainship at the end of the season. If it was decided by like coaches or I know players probably. I think the team probably looks at Malachi Moore's action a little bit differently. I think everyone's frustrated. They understand that he's frustrated, but from a maturity level, I mean, this is a 5th-year senior that acted like a problem child junior college player. And that's the most surprising thing. And a guy that's a leader, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it just, it shows you how frustrated Alabama is, but it also shows you, I mean, like, it's concerning that as like I said, as hard as I'm coming down on Malachi right now, I think the most concerning part is him disregarding Kane Wommack, because kicking the ball, all that stuff, that is, that's correctable. And that is something that you can just raise your hands up. It's not so much the fact that, I'm sure Malachi Moore feels bad about this. I'm sure he's remorseful. I'm sure he probably, I hope for Alabama's sake, that he went to Kane Wommack and apologized. Okay. All of that, I still think they need to suspend him or put a severe punishment, make him apologize publicly, something. Not because he needs to get it, because I'm kind of confident. I'm with DeBoer. I'm kind of confident that Malachi Moore is going to see this. He's going to get embarrassed. He's, like I said, he's a good kid, so it's not like he's not one of these kids that's just going to look at this and say, oh, they're overreacting. I'm sure he's going to look at this and be bothered by his own actions. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's a good kid, as hard as I'm coming down on him. But there's a lot of young players, especially in this secondary. And who's to say that they don't look at this action and they don't store this away? And whether it's later this year or later in their Alabama career, is it okay now to disregard your defensive coordinator if you're, good enough to do so? And I just don't. I think it's a bad message. And I think, as good as a captain as Malachi Moore has been, as important of a part of this team, and as important as he was to DeBoer in getting settled at Alabama, I think you need to make a statement. You need to, sit him out for maybe a half, you know what I'm saying, against South Carolina. And maybe it even requires Kalen DeBoer coming to Malachi Moore in private and saying, hey, look, we understand that you get it. We understand that you're sorry. We need to make a statement. This is what you did is not okay. And I know you get it, but we have to make sure everyone gets that what you did is okay. I'm not the head coach. I'm just a guy right now on the internet, but that's how I would handle it. And, Kalen DeBoer and Kane Wommack are going to handle it in their way, and they're going to do what they see fit. But I tell you what, man, I think something has to be big, and it can't just be, we talked with Malachi Moore. I mean, shoot, Jeremy Bernard had to apologize to the team for saying he didn't like jump around, that was, if he had to do that, then Malachi Moore definitely needs to make a statement.
Yeah, I don't think I necessarily disagree with you. This is the big moment, it feels like, for Wommack and DeBoer in terms of how you handle a thing like this. I'm glad that you said first off, because I've been reading a lot of comments about this, and the people who have said the stuff that, it's just his passion. I'm glad someone on this team showing emotion. That's not how you show emotion on a field and
Sure.
Do it properly. So I agree with that first off. But yeah, this is a big moment, I think, for DeBoer and Wommack. And I think I agree with your thought process in terms of, yeah, it's your captain. And to be honest, again, from what we know about Malachi Moore, he'll probably lead that effort in part. I think he'll probably be understanding that, he is held to a different standard as a captain of this team. And, that probably results in a little bit of an example being made to say to these younger guys, hey, we as a coaching staff are not going to stand for, this kind of standing up when you're being asked to come off the field by your coaches. No one's above any of that. And yeah, I could very well see something coming his way.
And two things can be true at once. I mean, Malachi Moore is a good leader, in general. And he is like this, you don't just negate his leadership throughout the last 2 years, or even longer. You don't negate that leadership. You don't. He's not a bad person. And that's the thing. Is like we live in a world of absolutes, and you could clip this YouTube and you make it seem like I think that this kid's a bad person, and I wrote about it and I criticized him online. I don't think he's a bad person, but two things can be true at once. This was one of the most embarrassing displays in recent Alabama history. And probably if you were just, I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing to rank, right? But if you were ranking embarrassing moments in Alabama history on the field, this was high on the list. of, there's not many coaches that it goes against all the principles of class and dignity. And Alabama, Alabama doesn't storm the field. Alabama doesn't do this. Alabama doesn't do that because they have class. They've been there before. Malachi Moore didn't show that, so I think you've got to you talk about it being the Bama standard, right? Ignoring this, pisses on sorry, better wording, but pisses on the Alabama standard. If you ignore this, you ignore the Alabama standard. There's part of the ethos of this team of what makes Alabama Alabama. You can't do stuff like this, Alabama, when they lose, they don't do stuff like this. I think a message has to be made, but I don't think it necessarily means that Malachi Moore is a terrible person. You don't kick him off the team for this, but you do make an example of him, and you hope that he's a strong enough kid that when you do make an example of him, he grows from it and he rallies behind the coaching staff and understands why they chose him to make an example of. He should be a strong enough leader that you can make an example of him, and I think ultimately. This will be an embarrassing moment on his career, but honestly, it doesn't tarnish his career forever. I think you can grow from this and you can look back and be like, man, this was an embarrassing moment. Look at how he took from this moment and helped Alabama. This is an opportunity for him to really grow and really prove himself as a captain. But a lot of things have to be done. And like I said, I'm frankly surprised that, an apology of sorts hasn't been made. And I kind of think that, once again, I'm speaking for something that I'm not a part of. So I don't know the feel of the locker room. I don't know the relationship between Kane Wommack and Malachi Moore. So it could be this thing's handled and they want to let bygones be guidelines. But I think it's important for Malachi's sake to make a public statement because, Kane Wommack's going through a lot. And like he had a bad day. His defense looked like crap. Alabama, this is one of the worst Alabama defensive performances, and he's going to be hearing about it. And the last thing he needs is to worry about his team not following his orders because he right now needs his team to follow the message more than ever. They need to get things sorted, and the last thing he has to worry about is losing the locker room. So I think it'd be important. It'd certainly be helpful to Kane Wommack if Malachi Moore said something about, hey, my actions were unacceptable. And, ultimately we all believe in Kane and, we got to move forward. I just think that would be important that could go a long way, in my opinion, in terms of Alabama kind of shaking this whole incident off.
Definitely from a messaging standpoint. I think that's a good segue from there is just, I like what you said about, this is a kid who you haven't seen a pattern of these types of things before. This is certainly something that you'd imagine a player of Malachi's leadership and maturity will look to correct and move on from, and can certainly grow from in a positive way. So yeah, we'll see what unfolds in terms of how this is, kind of handled in the coming days. But none of this happens, Tony, of course, if Moore and the rest of this defense, and we've been alluding to it already a bunch, doesn't play how they did on Saturday. And I think that's a good segue to dive into it. You mentioned the struggles on third down. Vanderbilt was 12 of 18 on third down. Obviously, Diego Pavia, we talked about him in the podcast before, and clearly we didn't talk about him enough. The kid was 16 for 20 through the air, 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. He absolutely marshaled Vanderbilt's offense. The Commodores rushing the ball. They ran it 54 times for 166 yards, 2 touchdowns. The option offense was confusing to me, I guess in the most, extreme reaction I had was there was a lot of times I didn't think Alabama knew who had the ball when they were running some of these plays. And time of possession you mentioned was a factor. Vanderbilt had the ball for 42 minutes and 8 seconds of game time, compared to Alabama having it for just under 18 minutes. Kind of break down how big of a factor that was, and just, dive into a little bit more what went wrong. It was, missed tackles, third downs. There's all sorts of stuff you can dive into. What did you observe?
Yeah. So speaking of Pavia, I'm just counting it up right now. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 third down completions. So, 8 third down completions. 1, 2, looks like he rough count of his passing. I think he was 8 of 10. I'm gonna save the viewers and not try to tally up the yards, but 8 of 10 on third downs. It looks like passing. That's great. I mean, it's almost better that Vanderbilt had those third downs and can pick them up, because that's just more time that they could keep Alabama's offense off the field. It's kind of crazy that Alabama's only had, like, if you really want to look at the craziness of this, Alabama had 390, so basically 400 yards in less than 18 minutes. I mean, Alabama's offense was pretty effective, but having the ability to not only was it the option offense, and a lot of it's running the ball, the clock's running, they were able to have these huge drives of just multiple possessions. I can look up the drive, 10 plays, 17 plays, 8, 6, 9, 4, 9, 7, 7. So like they're all, they're taking a lot of time off the clock. And you've got, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 6 minutes, 5.5 minutes. It's just, they've got a lot of really long drives where they just kind of like, frustrated Alabama, and were able to kind of take the clock off, and that just puts more pressure on Alabama's offense. And it makes Alabama's offense work fast. And so even if Alabama scores, the defense comes right back on the field, and you can just kind of wear down the defense. And if you can't get stopped, I mean, you're going to get worn down. I wonder if at the end, normally, after Jalen Milroe scores that, or actually, no, sorry, it was Ryan Williams scores the touchdown at the end, you start thinking like, okay, Alabama's, Kalen DeBoer was asked kind of about like not going for an onside kick late in the game. And I think you can maybe criticize, I guess the counterpoint to not going for it, or like the argument to go for it, I guess, would be, look, your defense is not getting stops. Why don't you try to get the ball back? Right. But I think Kalen DeBoer's thinking like, if I can't get a stop in this situation, I'm probably going to lose the game. It's just like, I should be able to rely on my defense to get one stop with its back against the wall. Come on, like, wake up, kind of like it did at the last minute against Georgia, where they drove down the field, but then they kind of woke up. And I think he's probably thinking at that point, let's do that deeper in Vanderbilt territory and get the ball back, because I'm still going to need a touchdown. And they just couldn't do it. I mean, even then, when you have a little bit of momentum and okay, you got to stop here. I'm pretty confident, Jack, that if Alabama would have gotten the ball back with a respectable amount of time, I think Jalen Milroe, Ryan Williams and company, I think they score. I think Alabama comes out with a 3-point win. They just never got that opportunity because the defense just they couldn't make a stop. And I wonder how much of that was were they tired at that point. But you almost can't even say that, because they from the start they weren't getting off the field.
Yeah, it was just all sorts of mistakes in different kind of areas defensively. They were missing tackles. I want to talk about penalties as well, because 4 defensive penalties for 48 yards. But again, and we've had this conversation. This is what happened against South Florida. The penalties were just in crucial situations. 2 of them were on 3rd and long that gave Alabama free first downs. There was a face mask and a roughing the passer. And then, of course, there was the most egregious one, or at least most talked about one, which was Alabama's first defensive penalty in the first quarter on a 4th and 4. You get a stop. Vanderbilt's up by a score at that point. It was 13-7. They punt the ball, and in the most ironic fashion imaginable, after Alabama's 2 number 2s, Ryan Williams and Xavier Brown, come up with huge plays against Georgia, they're on the field at the same time, which gave Vanderbilt a free first down. They turned that, of course, into their longest drive of the game and scored a touchdown and went up by 2 scores. I mean, it is those kinds of mistakes that you just cannot make. And it feels to me that that's a broader sign that there are just underlying problems with, this team grasping some of the concepts. I know that was a special teams penalty, but just some of the things with Kane Wommack's defense have just not been taken in.
Yeah, the special teams penalty. I mean, I personally think Alabama's getting too cute with that. Either let's, from an Alabama perspective, let's not have 3 different punt returners at this point. You're 2 games now into SEC play. Pick one. And I get that Cole Adams is hurt, but you also had Jalen Mbakwe. And Now you have Ryan Williams. If it's going to be Ryan Williams, then like let it be Ryan Williams, and then don't have to worry about people changing numbers, or maybe you don't have Xavier Brown on the field, or if you do, then he knows that every time he's on the field he has to change a number, or Ryan Williams knows that every punt return he has to change a number, whatever it is. But don't be like switching it out every 3 punt returns. Like if it's going to be Cole Adams, let it be Cole Adams. If it's going to be Mbakwe, let it be Mbakwe, like until they make a mistake. Don't this whole cycling it out, or, and all of that penalty that cost them, it was just on a fair catch. It's not even like Ryan Williams even got the chance to return the ball. So I thought that's kind of goofy. I'm not necessarily those kind of mistakes can happen, I guess. I think it's more of a case of, yes, the communication has to be fixed, but that's also like, in my opinion, like old man yells at cloud kind of thing. Like stop just goofing around with the punt returners. Pick one, go for it. It's a role on the team. It's not like some privilege. It's not like a penalty kick in soccer where you do it to give someone momentum. Like let's just let's pick somebody and roll with it. And that was a super inopportune time. I think that was the 17 play drive for. Actually, you talk about those penalties. Didn't they all happen on that 17 play drive?
Yep.
Yeah. So you had they got the ball back on special teams, but then you also had the roughing the passer penalty, and there was also what was the other one?
Face mask.
Face mask. Yeah. So I think if I remember right, I have to go back and look at the clip. The roughing the passer one was a little weak, right? I think it was kind of a little bit of a softer from the passer penalty. So maybe give them a break on that one. But, the other two were very preventable and just really bad.
Yeah, I just think it's again mistakes, and when the penalties are costly on those kinds of downs, you have to apply them with more scrutiny than just the penalty yards they account for, because it's the difference of getting your defense off the field quicker, which proved to be crippling with, again, the time of possession factor, which I don't think can be overstated. I mean, Vanderbilt to me found the recipe of how to beat this Alabama team, and it's just taking what the defense gave you, being a little bit cute. I mean, when you defend the option play, it's as simple enough as like understanding assignments, and Alabama's players didn't do that. We didn't know who was picking up the quarterback, who was picking up the running back, who was picking up the lead blocker. They were handing off shovel passes and taking it through a crowd of defenders and emerging for 20 yards. I mean, it's just got to be better to me.
They did find a workable,
yeah.
I don't know if they've necessarily found the formula to beat Alabama. They found their formula to beat Alabama. It's not like South Carolina can be like, all right, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to learn the option offense and then hope that we can be 60.
Hopefully Alabama doesn't play Navy. I mean,
we're going to learn the option offense, and then we're going to hope that we can be 66% on third down. That's not a great, overall, to put it in Hugh Freeze terms, Alabama wins this game 9 times out of 10. But Vanderbilt drew up a very workable plan and beat Alabama. There's no fluke about it. The reason why I said the 9 times out of 10 thing wasn't to dunk on Vanderbilt. It was more just the fact of everything went right, but also Vanderbilt did everything to put itself in a position to do everything right. And they straight out beat Alabama. As bad as Alabama's defense is right at the moment, 66% is a lot on third down. And, you get 1 or 2 more of those stops, and this is a totally different game. So, I think that I don't know if they necessarily cracked the code. I think they just exposed more of the stuff that we already knew about this. Alabama's got a bad secondary, and test it. And third and 10s are not as hard to pick up against Alabama as they are other teams. So I think you're going to run into that problem. It's kind of a weird thing to maybe point out now, because this is a team that also had a bad game and lost to an unranked opponent. But Tennessee is a team, I think, with Nico that can maybe exploit Alabama. Look, Tennessee's one of the best running teams in the nation. I think we've been pointing, because the last time Alabama went to Neyland and they got torched in the air. I think that, you look and you're like, oh, well, Tennessee has a 5-star quarterback who could really hurt the secondary, but also Tennessee can run the ball but like you look at a team like that, I think they've got to be licking their chops for that game on the third Saturday of October of just what they can do to this offense if it doesn't change. Because I see this same problem happening against a team like that. I kind of, I mean, it could happen against South Carolina. Shoot, I mean, really, you're kind of in the same situation that you were with Vanderbilt. I think the South Carolina team's not a bad team. I think Vanderbilt's probably a better team than the South Carolina team. But look, if Alabama makes these mistakes, doesn't get the turnovers, and they're perfectly capable of losing next week to South Carolina. I do think that this is going to be like a get right game, and it's almost like my interest level for this next game is so low, Jack, because I don't think I'll trust it. Even Alabama could come in and beat South Carolina 50-0. I don't think that's going to prove anything to me. I think it's just going to prove that like when Alabama's head's on straight and things are clicking, that they can beat anyone and they can do whatever they want. But I will be very slow to get carried away if Alabama answers back big against South Carolina. Let's see how they do it against Tennessee.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I say that, and I'm maybe falling into the same trap that Alabama. Once again, you cannot overlook a South Carolina because it's probably on a somewhat similar level to Vanderbilt. They've got a decent defense, and it's a team that start screwing around with that turnover differential, and who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Alabama couldn't afford to overlook anyone coming in. They certainly can't afford to do it now. And you mentioned that not forcing any turnovers. I mean, and even I'll go back quickly to the third and fourth downs on Vanderbilt's one fourth down attempt that they actually went for. They turned, they were trying to get a short gain into a touchdown after Malachi Moore got beat, and Pavia made a nice play. DeBoer said it as much. That was probably the biggest backbreaker of the game.
Broken coverage too. I mean, like you would think if I would have told you that Vanderbilt went for a 4th and 1 and then threw it 36 yards in the air, like I would have said like, oh, Alabama stopped them. Like they got too cute. And then now this is wide open. I mean, the only thing like the wide receiver kind of bobbled it and you thought maybe, oh, is he going to hold on to it? But yeah, like another broken coverage for Alabama's secondary. It's like I almost felt like Vanderbilt gave Alabama a break by passing it there. I thought with not a triple option, but with an option offense, I was shocked to see them not run the ball because I think they would have picked it up if they ran it too, but like I thought they almost, I think a play call like that is the kind of play you look at normally and Alabama gets to stop and you're like, oh, they haven't been there before. They got a little too cute with it. They thought that they were going to, and then that could have been a huge momentum shift and it just wasn't. And it's just another, I guess, mark against this secondary that really just needs to, across the board needs to be better. I think I looked at the PFF grades and Damani Jackson has the best coverage grades I think from this game, but like he wasn't great. I'm just from the eye test and watching him, I think I remember at least one or two plays where he allowed a sizable reception. So it's not necessarily one person. Malachi Moore wasn't great. Let's see, looking at the targets.
Yeah, I mean, it was Zabian Brown and Damani Jackson who they both had two kind of pass breakups on when Vanderbilt would occasionally take deep shots. But yeah, a 70 being your best coverage grader was Damani Jackson. Zabian Brown was second at 66. I mean, that's not a great standard to set.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I guess Zabian Brown, I mean, he's got targeted twice, didn't allow a reception, and got a pass breakup. Maybe he gets a little bit of a pass in this game in terms of but yeah, I mean, Damani Jackson's your highest graded coverage person in terms of PFF grades, and he allowed 4 receptions on 5 targets and for 43 yards. Sometimes that can be deceiving. 43 yards isn't a lot for giving up 4 receptions. But yeah, things have got to be better across the board. Malachi Moore, we were kind of talking about him. He if he's frustrated, he's got to be he's the first person he's got to point to because he was targeted twice, allowed a 36-yard reception. He had a missed tackle in the game as well. It allowed a touchdown on a ball turn his way. So, he has to get better, both, in terms of his leadership and his performance. So it's not just him, though. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's pretty much everyone across the board. They're just not a very reliable unit at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely not. And you mentioned the turnovers. That's a thing Kane Wommack preaches, is when, Alabama's offense commits them, it's getting the ball back. And I think that's a good segue because Alabama, of course, didn't do that on defense. The offense had 2 turnovers. And I just want to get your quick thoughts on them, because I think you and I are both in agreement for how little they were able to take the field. They did a fairly good job of taking advantage outside of a couple of mistakes. I mean, what did you notice from the offense? Was there maybe some things they could have done better, or just, things that you noticed that maybe were different from the first couple of games? Because I think overall they handled their time on the field fairly well.
Yeah, it's just so hard to judge. I gave the offense a B- in my grades, piece that I do after the game. That was basically the knock that I think I could have easily given them like a B+. To be honest with you, I think that the turnovers were the reason why I knocked them so hard. But like, it's because those turnovers were both pretty costly. Obviously, one resulted in a touchdown. The other one, Alabama has a chance to go up. They're around midfield and you fumble. I mean, that was a huge. That's one of the first times where I thought, oh gosh, Alabama could lose this. So those were 2 killer turnovers. But other than that, yeah, they're fine. I mean, you can point to the run. I'm looking at it here. They averaged 4 yards a carry, 21 attempts for 84 yards. That's not great. I mean, Jalen Milroe, as much as they've relied on him to run the ball, I think, so he only had 7 attempts for 10 yards and obviously that touchdown. You really can't grade them too hard against the run. They didn't have enough time to run the ball. You can't sit and establish a good running game when you're down by 2 scores constantly. And that, every time the other team gets the ball, 6 minutes are coming off the clock. You almost have to be explosive and take advantage of the fact that you can score fast, because you needed to score multiple touchdowns and you kind of didn't have faith that your defense was going to get a stop. So I'm not really necessarily concerned about the running game per se. You look at the running backs. That's one of the things we had talked about. The running backs maybe not getting. I mean, Jam Miller had 5 attempts for 45 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he was pretty solid when he had. Now I will say that 32 yards of that was on 1 run. So I mean, that kind of the rest of it. You could maybe. He wasn't getting a consistent amount of yards, but once again, I'm not really concerned about the run there. And then you look at Milroe's stats. 19 of 25, 312 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Like, that's a great game. That's a great passing game. So that first mistake, that pass, the pick 6 was a bad pass. He forced it in there. Like, I don't want to put another percentage on it, but more times than not, that's one of those plays that's like an incomplete pass, and then your offensive coordinator yells at you and says, like, can't be making those throws, bad things can happen. But like, it's one of those things that like the bad things don't actually normally happen, and this is like the odd time where the ball just popped up, like it felt like 30 feet in the air. Probably not, but like it just popped up so high and it was just easy for the pick. I mean, that's what happens when you throw into those plays. But like that was an unlucky bounce to a certain extent. Like there's plenty of times where I've seen that pass just be an incompletion, and so that was kind of tough. That really, I mean, that wasn't Jalen Milroe's only mistake of the game. He didn't find a few people. I think, trying to remember one time whether it was an incomplete pass. I remember one time he had Ryan Williams wide open, didn't see him. I mean, that's going to happen throughout a game. You want him to improve on that, I guess, but I don't really even want to get too hard on Jalen Miller. I mean, 19 and 25 for 312 yards. That driving down the field, Now he did have some great catches from his receivers. Ryan Williams made another highlight, acrobatic sideline. The kid's amazing. And then actually even better was that catch by Jeremy Bernard on the sideline as well. But still, I mean, like he put both of those balls were still put in the position where his wide receivers can make plays. Dylan Miller had a good game. Like this game might hurt his Heisman odds just because he lost to Vanderbilt, I guess. But I think you look at like he's still very much in the Heisman race, in my opinion. When you look at his performance and what he did to win the game, I think he put in a winning performance. Like, if Alabama had some semblance of a defense, they win that game. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think again it goes to the overall point of the defense did not give the offense nearly enough opportunities to go out and win the game. The offense kept Alabama in it. They did their best, but it was overall just a woeful defensive performance. And I think that's a good segue to going forward, because that is where all the overreaction goes. And obviously, if this result happens a year ago, Alabama's college football playoff hopes are over. You're playing at that point for maybe a New Year's Six bowl or something interesting. That said, it's a 12-team playoff now. We're in a new era. This team's college football playoff hopes are still intact. You wrote about it in your column. They control their own destiny. They have winnable ranked games coming up to prove themselves. How concerned are you that they can accomplish that? And where do you see this team maybe finishing after a game like this and growing from this, especially on the defensive end?
Okay, so first off, we're actually kind of where we thought Alabama would be, right? I mean, I think I predicted them to lose to Georgia in the end. So they're 4-1. They're 4-1 after 5 games, and now there was an argument. I've seen Twitter polls and I've had discussions. Would you rather Alabama have lost a close game to Georgia and won a close game against Vanderbilt, or the vice versa, which is what happened, right? I actually think Alabama is better this way. I think especially if Vanderbilt can continue playing to this level and get a bowl, even if they get to 6 wins and just get a bowl, I think you lost a tough game on the road. It's going to still be an embarrassing loss, but in the end, I mean, look, we've seen Alabama lose. Go back a couple years ago when they lost 2 games and didn't make the playoff. Granted, that was a 14 playoff, but when they lost to Tennessee and LSU, and Nick Saban goes on, national television the day before the final playoff committee makes their final decision, and he's trying to campaign that Alabama only lost these 2 games, one on a game-winning field goal, one in overtime on a 2-point conversion. It's like you're saying you're right there, but then the argument that year was Alabama didn't beat anybody. And then it was a good point. Like they didn't. Like they had really good losses, but in the end, and I know losses matter. And you look at like what's a good loss, and I know that's part of the playoff committee's like decision making factor. But I still think good wins matter. And Alabama still has the best win in college football. And really, it might if Georgia continues to win, if Georgia beats Texas, it's going to end up being the best win in college football. And so I think if you have that, and even if you're 10-2, I think you got a pretty good playoff chance, especially if some of these teams that Alabama could, like you said, if they stay ranked. And I mean, the flip side too is you look at some of these teams and they're not as intimidating as they were at the beginning of the year. You look at Tennessee, they lost to an Arkansas team that is similarly embarrassing as the Vanderbilt loss. Honestly, if you put Vanderbilt versus Arkansas on the same field, who's winning that game? I'm not sure that Vanderbilt doesn't come away with the win there. So I still think Alabama's loss is, more embarrassing just from the being number one and, just everything that transpired. But at the same time, I mean, Tennessee can't be feeling all that great about itself. I know that game's in Neyland, and to be honest with you, right now, I'm picking Tennessee to win that one. But let's just say that they lose that one. I still don't think Alabama's season's over. They'll have 2 losses. They can't lose again after that. But you look at you've got a Missouri team that I just don't think is as good as was advertised. Probably still be ranked when it plays Alabama, but I don't think that's going to be near as much of a problem as maybe we thought it could be. And then that trip to Baton Rouge, that's never easy. But this Tigers team is this LSU team, they haven't really impressed yet. They've just gotten by on a few of their victories, and then obviously they lost a Southern Cal team that just already has 2 losses. Doesn't seem like that loss is going to be a great loss for LSU. I said it at the time when LSU lost to Southern Cal, and people were like, "Oh, these 2 teams could be good." And I was like, I think we're going to look back at this game and think like, "Oh, this was a great game between 2 kind of mid teams." I think that's what it is. I think, like I said, I think LSU has a chance of beating Alabama, but I'd still pick Alabama. So then you look further on down the schedule, you still have a trip to Oklahoma, and then the Iron Bowl can always be tricky. But assuming Alabama can get mentally stronger, I don't see them losing at either of those 2 games. So, kind of just ballparking the season right there, I have them losing to Tennessee in a game where I still think Alabama could come out and win, and they're still 10-2. And if they're 10-2 with a loss to Tennessee and maybe number 1 Georgia, maybe I think at this point, Alabama roots for Georgia to beat Texas. I think that Alabama wants that game to be as good as it can be. But like, I don't put it past Georgia to beat Texas. So but even if it's a 2-loss Georgia, that's probably still a top 12 team. It's still a good win, right? And then they'll have a ranked win under my ballpark figure. They'll have a ranked win probably against either LSU or Missouri. One of those teams will still stay ranked, and maybe even Oklahoma might mess around and be ranked. So like Alabama will have the wins on its schedule to be 10-2. I think it still makes the playoff. But at this point, like I said, going back earlier, you can't just assume 10-2. I mean, at this point, I think all 3 of the games in that little gauntlet are winnable. They're all losable, and Alabama could easily, we could be talking about Alabama just putting together a terrible season if things just totally unravel. I still think we're closer to, Alabama I'm still confident in Alabama's ability to bounce back, but this game against Vanderbilt shows that they could lose to anyone.
Absolutely. I mean, you need only look as far as the AP poll. I mean, yes, a plunge from 1 to 7 is significant and deserving for the loss it was, but you look at a couple of spots down the line. Missouri dropped 14 spots to 21 for its loss against Texas A&M. Michigan dropped 14 spots almost out of the poll entirely for a loss to an unranked USC unranked Washington team, excuse me. Neither of those 2 teams have a win that Alabama does. That does count for something, and clearly it counts for a lot in the AP poll. Now the college football playoff poll is different, but that's going to count for something in the college football playoff.
Tennessee doesn't have a win like Alabama does either.
Exactly. So it's I mean, it's just as important to rack up those wins as sometimes it can be, especially in the 12-team playoff where you can afford a little bit more slip ups. Now that, again, does not excuse what happened on the field on Saturday night, but and Alabama has to get right on the defensive end to win those games that you were talking about, because they are all losable. But yeah, it's a weird place because, everyone has to switch their mindset where a loss to Vandy does not end your season, which feels weird to say, but it's true. Just kind of your final thoughts, maybe what you're looking to hear from Kane Wommack in particular this week, and how Alabama is going to get right against, like you said, a very physical South Carolina team. I will throw out, they have a running back named Raheem Sanders who can hurt you badly.
Alabama fans know about Raheem Sanders. I mean, they've played him in Arkansas the last couple of years. So, look, I'm interested to see how this coaching staff responds. I don't expect there to be fire. I don't expect Kalen DeBoer to come out and just be absolutely pissed and have a tirade, as I pretty much can guarantee you Nick Saban would have had. I don't think that's a bad thing, but this is a testing moment for him. It's a testing moment for Kane Wommack. This is the kind of situation, Jack, why Nick Saban didn't let you talk to coordinators. Like, this is a huge press conference that Alabama would have never had before, so it's going to be interesting to, like you said, to see how Kane responds to this, what he says about Malachi. And I think it's an interesting situation because it's not just something you can say like, oh, if he sweeps it under the rug and does coach speak, everything will be great. I don't think that's the case. I think if he does that and he's too soft on Malachi, I think it sends the wrong message. I think he's got to be like firm, but not, overbearing. I think like they don't have to like be fake about it. They don't have to come out there and be, pounding the podium and, just not themselves. Like they have their own style with the media, and that's fine. But they still have to send a firm message that, hey, like being unprepared mentally in this game was not okay. The reaction from Malachi Moore was not okay. Like they've got to send those messages. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how they do that. And ultimately, that I think it's going to speak a lot of volumes between the control they have on the team. The one thing I will say against that is if Kalen DeBoer or Kane Wommack comes out and it is not what you as a Alabama fan want to see, you're not the coach. So like you can be the first one at that point when it goes wrong to say like, I told you so. But like at the very end, like if Kalen DeBoer wants to sweep this Malachi Moore thing under the rug, that's a coaching decision. That there's a strategy in that in doing that. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good move, but there is a rationale, I guess, behind doing that, and you almost have to respect him. And I will respect whatever decision he makes with his team. Now, I'll probably be the first one to point out if it goes wrong again. I'll be the first one to circle this little date and be like, you should have done this, but we'll just have to see. But yeah, I'm interested to see all that.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be, we'll have coverage of it on Tide Illustrated. So definitely tune in on Monday. You might be listening to this before or after the presser, and yeah, you're gonna want to watch it and tune in and see what Kane Wommack says, see what DeBoer says, because this is a moment of adversity. The honeymoon period is over for Alabama's new head coach. This is wake up call time, and it's going to be interesting to see how a guy with his calm demeanor kind of responds, and how Kane Wommack, a guy who's been a head coach, chooses to respond. So we'll have it all covered for you. We tried to recap the events of this game as best we could. We got more stuff on Tide Illustrated from the game, so go read that if you just want to, I don't know, keep consuming more badness if you're an Alabama fan, or maybe you're a Vanderbilt fan on here enjoying the greatest win in your school's history, which I guess, congrats to them.
I think it probably, yeah.
easily. Yeah. And yeah, so we will see how everything goes this week. We'll have a coverage for you. So subscribe here, subscribe to Tide Illustrated, and we will see you next time.